श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विषये पौरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीकृष्णामूर्ते नमः। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। व्यासाय विष्णुरूपाय व्यासरूपाय विष्णवे नमो वै ब्रह्मणवे वासिष्ठाय नमो नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणे स्वयं व्यासेन कृतितं पुराणमयनां मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीमष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते द्वेषिणि नारायणपरो व्यक्तादण्डमव्यक्तसम्भवम् अण्डस्यान्तस्त्वमे लोकास्तद्वीपा च मेदिनी अवतीर्णश्च कालट्यां केदारेऽन्तर्हितश्चेह चतुष्पीठपदिष्टात् जयताच्चङ्कुरो शङ्कारूपेण मच्चित्तं पङ्कीकृतमुबोध्य किङ्क्रीससामाया शङ्कराचार्यमाश्रये। Previously, we were looking at Sri Shankaracharya's introduction to before 11th shloka on this Sankhya Yoga, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He was giving a recap of all the things and then going a little bit more in elaboration of what we are going to learn in this Bhagavad Gita. So he said that from the very beginning, from the first chapter to 9th shloka in the second chapter, all that showed was revealing the cause of the origin of the defects in the form of sorrow, delusion, etc., right? Which are the sources of cycle of birth and death in the creatures of the creatures. So the samsara, this cycle of birth and death, is due to those sorrow and delusion. And Arjuna, again thinking that these belongs to me, they belong to me, and for that reason, he was his own sorrow and delusion was caused by those things, thinking that these belong to me and I belong to them. And because of his discriminating that inside, that Viveka was overwhelmed by the Shoka, Moha, and other avidya and things, he forgot that he came to the battle to perform his own duty as a Kshatriya. And Shankaracharya says, and he was thinking about going as a Muni, going on a duties, taking the Rishi Muni's duty, like begging and things like that. He was thinking about those things. And Shankaracharya says that it is thus that in the case of all the creatures whose minds come under the sway of these defects of sorrow, delusion, etc., they certainly follows, they certainly abandon their duties, resorting to prohibited ones. So what is prohibited here for Arjuna, for example, was going and begging an alms and things, and begging those things is prohibited for him because he is a Kshatriya. Those duties, sannyasa ashrama, is for brahmanas, not for kshatriyas, and he has already come to the battlefield, right? So that's why he is saying, Shankaracharya says that people, when they are deluded with delusion, sorrow, and so on, they abandon their duties and they resort to the prohibited ones. And with even when somebody follows their duties, following their duties, even in those cases, their actions with speech, mind, body, and so on are certainly motivated by the rewards, the results of those actions, whatever they are doing. And it is accompanied by egoism, saying that I am doing this, I'm going to benefit from this. So that's why they do those actions because of those things. So in the expectation of results. And such being the case, the cycle of birth and death, the samsara, which is characterized by desirable and undesirable births and meeting with happiness, sorrow, and so on, from the accumulation of dharma and adharma that performed actions, that cycle of birth and death continues unendingly. And the sorrow and delusion, shoka, moha, they are therefore the sources of this cycle and of birth and death, this samsara. They are the source of this cycle and birth and death. And at this time, I think last week there was a question saying when I said cycle of birth and death, and someone gets born as a human being or lower creatures and things like that. So because of the virtuous or unvirtuous things one has performed, or the happiness one gets, or sorrow one gets, all these things is the result of the previous births. Yes, so even the lower creatures have the atmas. The atma enters in those bodies and stays there till that sinful whatever that accumulated has been experienced by that creature, and then it dies, and then it atma enters the another form. So that cycle continues till that sukshma sarira. We will come to the details of that. So atma takes in that form, and atma in the form of a body experiences it. Okay, the body experiences, atma does not experience it. So the body experiences in form of a creature or whatever, human being or whatever. So atma stays there, but it feels like atma is experiencing to us. Okay, so it feels like that. So we'll come to that a little bit more detail. Atma and sharira and atma, it's very deep topic. So we'll come to Shankaracharya himself explains a little bit later. So such a cycle of birth and death, which continuously happens because either one is not following their duties or following because of expectation of results, or thinking that I'm going to benefit from that, I'm doing it, and things like that. Because of those reasons, because of that ego, that ahankara, the cycle of birth then continues. But such a samsara comes to an end from nothing other than atmajnana, knowledge of self, which preceded, which such an atmajnana is preceded by renunciation of all the duties. So karma sannyasa. So one takes karma sannyasa, one reaches karma sannyasa, then he attains this atmajnana. And that's why to make Arjuna as a medium, Paramatma explains these words, which is starting in shloka 11 in this adhyaya, Ashochan, Ashochasvam, and so on. So he starts from there. So explaining that. So for everybody to help all the world, whole world, he starts that. So when we hear that Shankaracharya saying that this samsara comes to an end by Atmajnana alone, which is preceded by karma sannyasa, there are some opponents who say that certainly that's not the case. Moksha cannot be attained simply by adherence to Atmajnana. Okay, Atmajnana is the continuance in Atmajnana is Atmajnana Nishta. The compound word here is Atmajnana Nishta, that is adherence or steadfastness in Atmajnana, self, knowledge of self. So certainly moksha cannot be attained simply by that. So some opponents say that this is not the case. So again, here in Shankaracharya in his Bhashya, he first makes a statement saying that Atmajnana is the only reason. Then he goes on to saying that there are some opponents who say that this is not true. Okay. So he then says that those opponents are wrong, and he explains that that's what I'm currently explaining. So the opponents, Shankaracharya, he does not name in his Bhashya who those opponents are, but Anandagiri, in his review of these Bhashyas and things, he says that Shankaracharya here is explaining none other than the Vrittikaras, those Vrittikaras' interpretation of Brahma Sutras, okay, and which is mainly from Bodhayana, who is an Acharya in Sri Ramananda Sampradaya. Is an Acharya. He was an Acharya, and he wrote huge commentary on Brahma Sutras, and in his Bhashya, Shankaracharya, Brahmasutra Bhashya, he refers to this vritti, which is the explanation given by Bodhayana, and he criticizes that. Okay. And in Gita Bhashya, he just says that here, in this instance, he says that the opponents say that the moksha cannot be attained simply by Atma Jnana Nishta with karma sannyasa. It cannot be attained, but the opponents say that. So who that opponents is, again, is most likely it's the Bodhayana who is looking at that vritti, that explanation of Bodhayana. So if opponents are saying it cannot be attained by simply by Atma Jnana Nishta preceded by karma sannyasa, what is that? So what is then? What is the way to attain moksha? So those opponents say that it is well ascertained, it is well known, well concluded that the whole Gita is in the whole Gita, it is concluded that the moksha is attained through knowledge associated with karma, rights and duties, like Agnihotra and things like that are prescribed in the Vedas and Smritis. It's only through one attains moksha. So those opponents are saying moksha cannot be attained by Atma Jnana alone, preceded by karma sannyasa, but it is attained through knowledge associated, joined with karmas. You cannot have karma sannyasa, you have to do with karmas, with rights and duties, which is described in the Vedas and Smritis, then only it is possible. So Agnihotra Shrota Smarta Karma Sahitat Jnanat Kaivalya Praptiriti Sarvasu Gītāsu Nichitortha. So those opponents say like this. And they also say that as an indication to this point, they point to the 33rd shloka in the second chapter in this Sankhya Yoga. Atacheto mevam dharmam sangramam na karishyasi. On the other hand, if you will not fight this righteous battle, so where Krishna says that if you do not fight this dharmic battle and so on to Arjuna, right? So the Krishna is saying him to perform his duties, rights and duties. And also Krishna says in the 47th shloka, karmanyevadhikaraste. Your right is for action alone. And also in the 4th chapter and the 15th shloka, he says, Kuru karmaiva tasmatvam, and so on. So therefore, you undertake action itself, right? So those opponents of who oppose the opponents here as the one who oppose that Atma Jnana Nishta does not lead to moksha alone. Okay, it has to be conjoined with rights and duties. Though those people quote these shlokas as their proof or as their evidence, as their supporting shlokas, saying that Krishna has said that you have to do these things. Arjuna, you have to follow your duties. Now, they also say that, those opponents also say that the objections should not be raised that the Vedic rights and duties lead to sin. Okay, so Vedic rights and things leads to sin because it is one's duty itself. So because it is a Kshatriya duty, it will not lead to any sin undertaken as a duty. So Bhagavan himself, even though it is cruel, it involves killing the elders, brothers, sons, and so on, it does not lead to any sin because it's his Arjuna's duty. And Bhagavan himself declares that Tadasudharmam kirtim chahitva papamavapsisi in 33rd shloka, right? So forsaking your own duty and fame, you will incur sin. So, but following this battle, you will not incur sin. So that's why opponents said it is foregone conclusion that one's own duties prescribed in the text, such as one should perform Agnihotra as long as lives and etc., and the actions which involves cruelty to animals and so on are not sinful. So this is the opponent's view. Shankaracharya says that the opponent's view is that the moksha is attained through knowledge which is conjoined with actions, conjoined with karma. Jnana with karma results in moksha. Okay. Even that if that karma involves himsa, okay, even if that karma involves uh, uh, the sinful activities, violence, and so on, as long as it is the prescribed duty of that person, it's okay. So that's what the opponents say. Now, Shankaracharya, in his response to such an opponent's objection, he says that tadasat, that is wrong. He says that tadasat. So, because he says that jnana karma nishtayor vibhaga vachanat buddhidvaya ashrayoho. So, because the assertion of the distinction between the one's adherence to knowledge, that is jnana nishta, and to karma, adherence to karma, which is karma nishta, which are based on two different buddhis, okay, convictions, two different convictions. So jnana buddhi, jnana nishta buddhi is different, karma nishta buddhi is different. Both are not same. Shankaracharya says that two are completely different. Okay, so what is buddhi? So you will hear these words, okay, buddhi, manas, chitta, ahankara, all these things. Okay, so it is same thing, antakarana, the inner inner thought process, inner mind. Okay, so that one where if it is with samshaya rupa, so it is if it entertains doubt, then it is called manas, mind. Okay, if it entertains doubt, if it is samshaya rupa, then it is called manas. If it leads to conclusion, okay, and if it is nishchayatmaka vritti, if it leads to conclusion, then it is called buddhi, conviction. Okay, we translate it as conviction. And if that creates pride, garva rupa, if it results in garva, creates pride, that's called ego, ahankara. Okay, and that antakarana, if it causes remembrance, okay, smarana rupa, if it is if it causes remembrance, then it's called chitta, translated as intelligence. Okay, so you will hear these words. So here, just coming back to Shankaracharya's Bhashya, he says that the adherence to knowledge and adherence to action, which are based on two different buddhis. Okay, so what are those buddhis? The nature of Atma, nature of Paramatma, is determined by the Bhagavan when he starts saying from shloka 2.11, where he says Ashochan Nashochastvam, and till 31st shloka in this, where he says Swadharmavapi Chavekshya and so on. So till in those shlokas, whatever he has described, he describes that Paramatma, and that's called, that nature of that Paramatma described in these shlokas from 11 to 31st is called Sankhya. Okay, Shankaracharya says that the nature of Paramatma described in shlokas 11 to 31st is called Sankhya. So Sankhya is actually means it is the correct knowledge of Vedas, which reveals the reality of Paramatma. Okay, so samyak khyayate iti Sankhya. So it is the correct knowledge of the Vedas which reveals the Paramatma, which reveals that reality of that self, that Paramatma, Atma, that's the supreme goal. Or you can say that the reality, the supreme reality, which is currently we are looking at between the shlokas 11 and 31st, the Paramatma, the supreme reality, which is related to this Sankhya by the way of having revealed by it, is called Sankhya. Okay, so Sankhya is the correct knowledge. Let's just simplify it. It is the correct knowledge of the Vedas which reveals the supreme reality, supreme Paramatma. Okay, so that's explained in shlokas 11 to 31st. That's what Shankaracharya says. That's the Sankhya. And Samkhya-buddhi, the conviction about that reality. Reality is in R capital, so it is the supreme reality, the Paramatma, the Sat. Okay, so that Paramatma, the conviction or the buddhi about that Paramatma, supreme reality, is the buddhi with regard to that Paramatma, with regard to Paramatma, arising from the ascertainment of the meaning of the shlokas here. For example, na jayate namriyate, so the one never born and never dies and so on. So once one realizes that this Atma never born, it's never dies and so on. So when one realizes that conviction, that buddhi, one comes to that conclusion, okay, when ascertainment of that such a conclusion comes, one comes to that conclusion that the Atma is not an agent, it is not the doer, because Atma is because of the absence in that Atma of 6 kind of changes, birth and so on, birth, continuance, growth, transformation, decay, and death. So all this you do not see in Atma. Okay, and when one reaches that buddhi, that conclusion arises in oneself, that buddhi is called Sankhya-buddhi. Okay, Sankhya is the knowledge of the Vedas, which reveals the Paramatma. The buddhi, the conviction that confirms or the understands that the Paramatma, the Atma is the not the agent, it is separate, it is unchanging. When one realizes that buddhi is called Sankhya-buddhi. And those men of knowledge, those men who have this jnana, who have this buddhi, and who have this buddhi as a knowledge or conviction as a natural in them. Okay, it is not that when we are listening to somebody saying, okay, Atma is unchanging, it is not an agent, and it is all these kind of things. At that time, we feel like, yeah, that may be right. But then next minute, we just go, it is all me, right? So if the Sankhya-buddhi is natural in one person, then those people are called Sankhyas. Okay, they are the Sankhya. So 3 definitions here. Sankhya, what Sankhya itself is. Sankhya itself means it is the knowledge of Vedas which reveals the supreme reality. The realization of that, the conviction that the definitive conclusion that one arises in oneself, saying, okay, so this self is not an agent and things like that. That conviction is Sankhya-buddhi. And those who have this Sankhya-buddhi in them as natural are called Sankhyas. Now, prior to arriving at this Sankhya-buddhi, that means one as coming to a clear conclusion that self is not an agent, self is separate from this body and so on. So before one arriving to that conclusion, the performance of the disciplines leading to moksha, which is based on discrimination between dharma and adharma, and which presupposes the self's difference from the body and so on, agentship, enjoyership, all these things. Okay. Before arriving at that Sankhya-buddhi, whatever one does as per the disciplines, follows the discipline performances one does, that's called yoga. Okay, so yoga here is this kind of similar to the language used is karma as well. Okay, so karma is excluded, but it is just simply called as yoga. And the buddhi with regard to that yoga is called yoga-buddhi, and the performer of those rites and duties whom this buddhi is appropriate is called yogis. Okay, so yogis are those performers of those rites and duties, and they have this conviction called, their conviction is, or buddhi is called yoga-buddhi, and through that yoga-buddhi, gradually the actions they perform, that is the performance of rites and duties, whatever they perform, that is called yoga. And performing this yoga continuously will lead to the change in the buddhi, okay, saying that, okay, that Atma, self-realization will come. Atma is different. Atma is not an agent and things like that. Such a conclusion will come, and that's Sankhya-buddhi, right? So you start with yoga and then you move to Sankhya. So Shankaracharya is saying Sankhya is different, yoga is different. Okay, Sankhya Buddhi. So the two types of Buddhi, Sankhya Buddhi, one is which is realized that Atma is different, okay, and Atma is not an agent, and it, because it does not go through those 6 kind of changes as at birth, continuous growth, transformation, decay, death, and so on. It does not go through that. So that's the Sankhya Buddhi. And then there is another one, which is the Yoga Buddhi. Yoga Buddhi is the conviction where one does the performs the rites and duties and so on. So performed by those yogis, that's the Yoga Buddhi. Okay, so he says that there are two types of two different things. The jnana, so again, this is going back to those answering those opponents, okay, who said knowledge has to be with karmas. Shankaracharya is saying knowledge is separate, karma is separate. Okay, so now again, accordingly, these two distinctions of buddhis have been described by the Bhagavan himself in the verses 39th verse, where he says, Isha te bihata Sankhya buddhir yoge tvimam shrunu. Okay. So this wisdom, this buddhi has been imparted to you from the standpoint of Jnana Yoga, that is Sankhya. But listen to this buddhi from a standpoint of Karma Yoga. So he says that Bhagavan in that 39th shloka, I told you this, all these things from the point of a Jnana Yoga, from Sankhya. Okay, from the point of self-realization. But now listen from the point of Karma Yoga. So Bhagavan himself says that there are two different buddhis, okay, in the 39th shloka. Shankaracharya now, just like opponents previously used some of the Karma Yoga related shlokas to say that karma is important, Shankaracharya is saying, using the same Bhagavad Gita to prove that two different things. Karma is different, jnana is different. And again, these two, the Bhagavan, the karma and jnana buddhis, Bhagavan will again speak separately with the reference to Sankhyas, okay, and of the firm adherence to jnana yoga. Okay, so again, here he is using the term yoga and knowledge as identical. Okay, jnana yoga. So yoga that through which one gets connected to identified with Brahman. Okay, so that's the jnana yoga. So the Bhagavan will speak these of jnana yoga, which is based on the Sankhya Buddhi. He says that in the third chapter, third shloka, he says Pura Vedatmana Maya Prokta. So 2 times of adherences were spoken to me in the form of Vedas in the days of olden days. Okay, so Bhagavan here indicated that Vedas, which are really the knowledge inherent in Bhagavan, in God, and issue out of him. Okay, so Bhagavan says that the Vedas come out of me are identical to myself. Okay, so that's what Bhagavan says in 3.3 shloka, third chapter, third shloka. So again, so that Sankhya Buddhi has been told by Bhagavan in that knowledge, Jnana Yoga, is explained in that. Similarly, in 3.3 again, he says that karma yogena yoginam. Okay, through the yoga of action, the yogis for the yogis, through the yoga is a yoga of action, karma yoga. Okay, so he will speak again, karma yoga nishta. Again, here the yoga is described as karma here. Okay, so in the same shloka, he said yoga as a jnana, which is Veda has come from the, I told Pura Vedatmana Maya Prokta and so on. And in the same shloka, he says karma yogena yoginam. So he talks about the karmas. So which is related to the karma, which is based on the Yoga-buddhi. Okay, so that is related to the rights and duties. So Bhagavan talks about two different types of buddhis. So that's why the two kinds of steadfastness, nishta, or adherence, that is based on this buddhi about the one is about the nature of the atma, nature of the self, and the other is based on the about the rights and duties, which is previously Bhagavan spoke again by himself, who saw the coexistence of knowledge and rights and duties is not possible in the same person. Okay, so that's why Bhagavan has said that there are two types of this. One is Sankhya-buddhi, another one is Yoga-buddhi. Yoga is karma, rights and duties. So those two are said, and that's why Shankaracharya says that through these things, we can say that coexistence of knowledge and rights and duties is not possible in the same person. Evam Sankhya-buddhim Yoga-buddhim cha ashritya dve nishte vibhakte bhagavataiva ukte jnana-karmanoh kartutva nekatva buddhyashrayoh yugapadeka purushashrayatva samubvam pashyata. So it is not possible because they are based on the conviction of non-agentship and agentship, unity and diversity respectively, right? So when you look at the karma yoga, rights and duties, it is the agentship I'm doing, okay, and that's what it is. When you look at jnana yoga, it is self is not an agent there, okay, so the atma is realized, so I'm not a doer. Okay, so that's why these are two different things. Again, in this teaching about distinction of these two adherences, these two steadfastness, these two nishtas, just so that it has been revealed in the Shatabata Brahmana, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also, it is said. So Shankaracharya quotes that here, saying that desiring this world, that is the world of Paramatma alone, desiring that world alone, Brahmanas renounce their home. Okay. Etameva pravrajino lokamichanto brahmanaha pravrajanti. So in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is said that desiring that Paramatma's world alone, Brahmanas renounce their homes. They become sannyasis. And again, after this enjoining renunciation of all the rights and duties, that is the karmas, it is said that the continuation kriyam kim prajaya karishyamo yesham noya matmayam lokaha. So again, so renouncing those rights and duties, it is said that the continuation, what shall we achieve through children? We who have attained this Paramatma, this world, this result, right? So those people who attained those Paramatma, the world of Paramatma, they say that what is the use of children and so on. So that's said in the Shatabata Brahmana. Shankaracharya quotes that it is the Vedas that says that once one attains that Atma Jnana, does not need this karmas. Again, in that same Shatabata Brahmana, it is said that before accepting a wife, a man in his natural state, that means he is bound by this ignorance, state of ignorance, owing to non-realization of that Paramatma. And such a person, being a brahmacharini, goes to the teacher for studying the Vedas and so on. And then after his learnings, inquiring into about rights and duties of the like a brahmachari, he, for the attainment of these of the three worlds, the worlds of men, pitrus, and devatas, he desires. Okay, so kamayata. So that's what Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says. So he desires as their means. So for the three worlds he wants to attain a son for the attainment of men's world, and the two kinds of wealth. One is manusha wealth, which is rights and duties or the karma that lead to world of pitrus, and then the daiva, divine wealth, and that leads to acquisition of vidya, which is the wisdom or upasana, which leads to devatas. So a man from avidya state, he goes to these three regions by performing those things. So that's what Shankaracharya says here, that the three desires he has. So the one is the attaining a son through which he attains the men's world, and two kinds of wealth, manusha and daiva, which lead him to, which again consist of rights and duties in the manusha, which lead him to pitrus, and then daiva, which consists of knowledge, upasana, vidya. Okay, so that lead to devatas. So this is again Shankaracharya here quoting that knowledge is different from the karmas. Okay, so they are not conjoined, they are not together, they will not go together. So we'll take a pause there. I think the next topic is going to take a little bit of more time, or just a little bit. So like that. So it is shown that Shankaracharya says it is shown that the rights and duties enjoined by the Vedas and Smritis and so on are meant only for the one who is unenlightened, who is avidya and is possessed of desire. Avidya kamavata eva sarvani karmani shrautadini darshitani. So only one who is having this avidya, ignorance, unenlightened, for them these rights and duties are there from the Vedas and Smritis. But after renouncing, taking mendicancy, sannyasa, utthaya pravrajanti, pravrajanti. So Brihadaranyaka Upanishad again. So after taking that mendicancy, the injunction to renounce is only for one who desires the world, that is the Paramatma, Atma, and that who is devoid of any attachment, any hankering. So now the intention of Bhagavan were, if the intention of Bhagavan were to combine the knowledge and Vedic rights duties together, then the utterance of these words of Bhagavan, Lokesmin Divida Nishta, in third chapter, third sloka, he says Lokesmin Divida Nishta. There are two types of distinctions, okay, in the world. So that would not have been said by Bhagavan, right? So Shankaracharya, that's why he says that Bhagavan himself says there are two types of nishta, adherences. So we will stop there and we will continue again on the same topic next time.